Welcome to this service of Lament, a time set apart to look squarely at the reality of suffering and of despair, at the plain and ugly facts of the brokenness of our world and of humanity, and then not to look away, not to gloss it over with a glib joke or an easy phrase or a thin optimism, but just to let it stand and bear witness to the reality of suffering. We do this tonight with music and silence, with poetry and news reports and scripture. And this is, in truth, only half of a service. It's incomplete without the Easter service that follows 2 days from now, a service of hope reborn. Just as the suffering and death of Jesus symbolizes the universal, the continuous reality of life, of suffering and death in life, so too the Easter story symbolizes the reality of a universal and a continuous rebirth of hope and of love. Love wins, but not without passing through a long and a difficult darkness. And tonight we stay a while in that hollow place. As the service progresses, we extinguish the candles one by one, and the music fades, and we remain behind, left in the very final minutes in darkness, in unanswered silence. And I invite you to take as long as you need in that space, and then to leave at the very end in silence, in solitude, and to carry that hollowness in a personal vigil till Easter morning. Why gather for this service? A friend explained it this way once. They said, we are here to guard against the great lie which our culture relentlessly feeds us, that the purpose and meaning of human life is to be happy. It is a seemingly innocent lie fed by people who would profit by our innocence, but our purpose is to overcome the muggy, mindless haze of everyday life, to develop a sensitivity to the reality of other people with their sorrows and struggles. Our purpose is to cultivate the spiritual maturity, to confront and deeply engage suffering and death. And only then can we truly give ourselves over to laughter and joy and pause in the face of the nearly imperceptible radiance of the ordinary. When we remember and retell the story of Jesus crucified on this Good Friday, not abstractly or symbolically or metaphorically, but as the physical torture and execution of a man whose call to radical love threatened an empire, when we retell that story, we do it to remember that suffering is an inescapable reality of living. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King preached these words 2 years before his murder. He said, Sunday after Sunday, week after week, people come to church with broken hearts. They need a word of hope. And the church has an answer. If it doesn't, it's not a church. But the church must say in substance that brokenheartedness is a fact of life. That Good Friday is a fact of life. That failure is a fact of life. Good Friday is as much a fact of life as Easter. Failure as much a fact of life as success. Disappointment is as much a fact of life as fulfillment. And the church must tell us to take up the burden, take up your grief, and look at it, and don't run from it.
On our president's first day in office, he signed an executive order pausing all foreign aid, including especially the U.S. Agency for International Development, the primary governmental organization that provides humanitarian aid to other countries on behalf of the United States. Within 2 weeks, the USAID website went down and the staffing cuts began among the workforce of 10,000. Within 2 months, the Trump administration terminated almost all of the last remaining 900 employees on March 28th. But the impact is larger. By ending contractors, service providers, and grant-funded positions, an estimated 51,946 American jobs have been lost in 46 states, and over 171,818 jobs have been lost globally. Donald Trump said of USAID, "It's a disaster. Radical left lunatics. Billions of dollars have been stolen. The whole thing is a fraud." In an interview with 60 Minutes, Andrew Natsios, former head of USAID under George W. Bush, responded, "It's utter nonsense. The most accountable aid agency in the world is USAID. 40% of the staff are accountants and lawyers and people trying to make sure no money is stolen." White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has repeatedly boasted of the project's cut thanks to getting rid of USAID. $2 million for sex changes in Guatemala, $6 million to fund tourism in Egypt, $20 million on a new Sesame Street show in Iraq, $4.5 million to combat misinformation in Kazakhstan. But this distorted list doesn't tell the whole or the real story. Says one health reporter, prior to the stop work order, at least 220,000 people worldwide got their HIV medication every day at clinics supported by the US government. A pause of any length in USAID-funded anti-HIV efforts will cause more people to contract the disease. Missing doses of a treatment can make it less effective. Without treatment, the disease kills young people in about 12 years and older adults even faster. As Mark Maneri, a professor of pediatrics at Washington University in St. Louis, explained, globally, nearly half of all deaths among children under 5 are attributed to malnutrition. When children reach the most severe stage, those old enough to have teeth can lose them. Black hair turns orange as the cells stop synthesizing pigment. Their bodies shrivel, and some lose the capacity to feel hunger at all. If malnourished kids don't get access to emergency therapeutic food because of the US government's decisions, in 3 months, half of them will be dead, and the rest will have terrible disabilities, mostly neurocognitive. In a study published in The Lancet, it was estimated that somewhere between 770,000 and almost 3 million people will die of HIV/AIDS-related illness as a result of the diminishing international support. Brooke Nichols, a mathematician at Boston University, estimates that one adult's life is lost every 3 minutes as a result of USAID cuts, and one child's life is lost every 30 minutes. Opinion: Trump's shameful campaign against transgender Americans. New York Times, February 9th, 2025. In the early days of Mr. Trump's second term, he has waged as direct a campaign against a single vulnerable minority as we've seen in generations. As of today, he declared in his inaugural address, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only 2 genders, male and female. Within hours, this language began to be codified in a series of executive orders and actions attempting to exclude transgender people from nearly every aspect of American public life, denying them accurate identification documents such as passports, imposing a nationwide restriction on gender-affirming medical care for transgender youths, investigating schools with gender-neutral bathrooms, criminalizing teacher support for transgender students, and commanding the Federal Bureau of Prisons to force an estimated 1,500 transgender women in custody to be housed with men. It was not unexpected. Anti-trans politicians spent at least $215 million to scapegoat transgender people for a variety of social ills. The Republican Party has increasingly viewed attacking trans rights as a political winner, much as it did attacking civil rights during Richard Nixon's presidency and attacking gay rights during George W. Bush's. That posture was disgracefully reflected in the speed and glee with which the House Republicans barred transgender women from using women's restrooms on Capitol Hill after the election of Sarah McBride, the first openly transgender member of Congress. As for Mr. Trump, he won power by caricaturing and demonizing trans people. Now he is using that power to harm trans people. This is a campaign in which cruelty and humiliation seem to be the fundamental point. The fear-mongering is all the more disproportionate given how few people identify as transgender. They are a minuscule less than 1% of the American population, and they are 0.002% of college athletes, a population that's been especially incendiary in the culture wars. In the US military, slightly more than 1% of troops are transgender, and that makes the Pentagon the largest employer of trans people in the country, which has made military service a prime target for the anti-trans movement. Another of the new president's executive orders aimed to oust openly transgender soldiers from armed services and bar others from joining. The order called for imposing federally mandated discrimination against the estimated 15,000 to 25,000 Americans who have agreed to put their lives on the line to defend the nation. He offered no evidence that this order would remove unqualified people from the armed forces or make the United States safer, because there is none. The language of this order was notable in part for its meanness. Expressing a false gender identity divergent from an individual's sex conflicts with a soldier's commitment to an honorable, truthful, and disciplined lifestyle, even in one's personal life. A man's assertion that he is a woman and his requirement that others honor this falsehood is not consistent with the humility and selflessness required of a service member, declared the order. Not only does this order erase the honorable service of soldiers who led infantry patrols in Afghanistan and flew combat missions over Syria, it attempts to deny that transgender people exist at all.
The encyclopedia definition for secret police starts like this. Secret police or political police are police, intelligence, or security agencies that engage in covert operations against a government's political, ideological, or social opponents and dissidents. Secret police organizations are characteristic of authoritarian and totalitarian regimes. They protect the political power of a dictator or regime and often operate outside the law to repress dissidents and weaken political opposition, frequently using violence. They may enjoy legal sanction to hold and charge suspects without ever identifying their organization. Rumeysa Öztürk has a little less than a year left to finish her doctorate in child study and human development at Tufts University. She's a Fulbright scholar who did her master's at Columbia's Teachers College and worked as a research assistant at Boston University. In the late afternoon at the end of March, Öztürk left her home to meet friends for iftar, the meal after sunset to break the Ramadan fast. Surveillance footage from the neighborhood shows her walking on the street wearing a hijab and a white coat, and a man dressed in a hoodie and a baseball cap, black pants, waves at her before stepping in her path to prevent her from walking away. She tries to move past him, but he stops her again and has a short conversation before grabbing her hands. Another man walks to her and pulls out a concealed police badge on a lanyard and takes her smartphone away, and more plainclothes people walk up to her. She screams and asks, "What's going on?" And someone in civilian clothes tells her, "We're the police, relax." And another says, "Okay, it's fine." And they take her backpack away and they handcuff her. And as bystanders start to come down on the far side of the street, the 6 people, 3 men, 3 women, cover their face with masks. A few of them wear sunglasses to hide their identities. An unseen bystander yells out, "Is this a kidnapping?" And the plainclothes police say, "We're the police." And the bystander says, "You don't look like it. Why are you hiding your faces?" Within 2 minutes, from start to finish, the 6 police who never identified themselves or their agency put Öztürk in an unmarked black SUV and drive her away. Öztürk attested that the officers didn't tell her why they were taking her, didn't allow her to speak to her lawyer despite repeated requests. Outside an office building, they moved her to another car with a different team of officers. She asked one of them, "Am I physically safe?" And he said, "We're not monsters." And another said, "We do what the government tells us." For 24 hours, at least, her location was completely unknown, even to her lawyer. Well, first she was taken to a detention center in Vermont and questioned throughout a sleepless night in a cell with no bed. In the morning, as she was being taken out, as she was going to the airport to be flown 1,500 miles to an ice processing center in Louisiana, against a court order from the previous night, which required 48 hours notice before she could be taken out of Massachusetts. As she was being taken out, one of the officers said to her, "I hope we've treated you with respect." 1,500 miles to Louisiana, where she roomed with 24 people in a cell whose official capacity was 14. While in detention, she learned that her student visa had been revoked 2 days before her arrest with no notice to her. She had been monitored covertly. A government agency had made the decision in secrecy. She has not been charged with any crime. There has been no evidence presented by the government at any time in any court or any public statement. No evidence. No reason beyond platitudes for why her student visa was revoked. She remains in detention. When people say, "We have made it through worse before," by Clint Smith. When people say, "We've made it through worse before," all I hear is the wind slapping against the gravestones of those who did not make it. Those who did not survive to see the confetti fall from the sky, those who did not live to watch the parade roll down the street. I've grown accustomed to a lifetime of aphorisms meant to assuage my fears, pithy sayings meant to convey that everything ends up fine in the end. There's no solace in rearranging language to make a different word tell the same lie. Sometimes the moral arc of the universe does not bend in a direction that will comfort us. Sometimes it bends in ways we don't expect. And there are people who fall off in the process. Please, dear reader, do not say that I am hopeless. I believe there is a better future to fight for. I simply accept the possibility that I may not live to see it. I've grown weary of telling myself lies that I might one day begin to believe. We're not all left standing after the war has ended. Some of us have become ghosts by the time the dust has settled.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone a long way from home, a long way from home. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home, a long way from home.
On the Thursday night after the election in November, we gathered here to sing and pray and rest a while in our bewilderment. At the service, we wrote down our hopes and our fears, all of them together, a stack of index cards, an index of anxiety and expectation. These are the fears you wrote that night. I fear that our undocumented neighbors will be imprisoned and deported. I fear my loved one's undocumented family will be harmed, detained, and deported. I fear the U.S. will leave the Paris Climate Accord. I fear the environment will suffer great setbacks, that oil and gas drilling will be allowed on national lands, BLM, monuments, and national parks, that extreme weather escalates, harming and displacing so many, climate refugees everywhere, here treated horribly, and environmental policies that are made only for the wallets of the rich. I fear for my friends who are transgender and have been making plans to leave this country for months. I fear there will be national anti-trans laws. I fear the free press will be destroyed. I fear our nation will abandon our Constitution. I fear our relationship with Europe will be weakened. I fear the rise of authoritarianism around the world. I fear Trump will join Putin and they will harm the Ukrainian people further. I fear that without the United States' help, Ukraine will fall and we will leave NATO. I fear Trump will become a dictator, that military or National Guard will be called out to do violence to peaceful protesters. I fear a totalitarian state replacing democracy, that ratting on neighbors will be enforced until we no longer can trust anyone, so we can't work together and overthrow it all because of extreme danger. I fear healthcare becoming even more unaffordable and largely unavailable, Social Security and Medicare gutted. I fear a national abortion ban, and as women living in a version of The Handmaid's Tale. I fear I will lose my right to vote, that we will be forced to leave our own country as refugees. I fear living in an overall culture of coldness, distrust, and cruelty. I fear hardships will make me hard. I am afraid of my own spiraling despair, feeling like giving up, loneliness. I fear my own hopelessness, losing my sense of self to fear, losing the ability in my family to create joy and wonder. I wonder if we are at the end of days. Will I be able to choose good over self-preservation? I fear that we will never heal.
The Gospel of Mark, chapter 15. As soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He answered him, "You say so." Then the chief priests accused him of many things. Pilate asked him again, "Have you no answer? See how many charges they bring against you?" But Jesus made no further reply, so that Pilate was amazed. Now at the festival, he used to release a prisoner for them, anyone whom they asked. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the rebels who had committed murder during the insurrection. So the crowd came and began to ask Pilate to do for them according to his custom. Then he answered them, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that the chief priests had handed him over. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release Barabbas for them instead. Pilate spoke to them again. "Then what do you wish me to do with the man you call the king of the Jews?" They shouted back, "Crucify him." Pilate answered, "What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers led him into the courtyard of the palace, that is the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole cohort, and they clothed him in a purple cloak. And after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on him, and they began saluting him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" and struck his head with a reed, spat upon him, and knelt down in homage to him. After mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. They compelled a passerby who was coming in from the country to carry his cross. It was Simon of Cyrene, father of Alexander and Rufus. Then they brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of a skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him and divided his clothes among them, casting lots to decide what each should take. It was 9 o'clock in the morning when they crucified him, and at 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And that question still echoes down through long centuries, still echoes in empty HIV clinics, in a quiet street in Boston, and on the index cards which catalog our fears, and in our own ears.